I am a man of science. I want to make that clear, before I tell you about the things that defy it. My name is Dr. Thomas Evelyn. For 20 years, I have mapped the human brain. I have held the physical substance of memory in my hands: gray matter, firing synapses, electricity, and chemistry. To me, a memory is nothing more than a protein chain, a groove worn into the biological vinyl of the mind. It is finite. It is local. It begins when we are born, and it ends, abruptly, when we die. Or so I believed. My son, Daniel, was the anchor of my reality. At 6 years old, he was everything a father could hope for: bright, curious, grounded. We lived in a townhouse in rainy Seattle, a world of gray skies, wet pavement, and the comforting hum of modern life. There was no incense burning in our home. No ancient texts. No talk of spirits. We were painfully, beautifully, ordinary. It started on a Tuesday. Not with a scream, but with a silence. We were sitting in the living room. The rain was drumming a steady, hypnotic rhythm against the large bay window. I was grading papers. Daniel was playing with a set of wooden blocks on the rug. The golden light from the floor lamp cast long, soft shadows across the room. It was the definition of peace. "Papa," Daniel said. His voice didn't sound like his own. It wasn't the high-pitched chirp of a 6-year-old asking for juice. It was flat. Resigned. I looked up over my reading glasses. "Yes, Danny?" He wasn't looking at me. He was staring out the window, but his eyes weren't focused on the rain-slicked street outside. They were fixed on a point 1,000 miles away. Or perhaps 1,000 years. "The olive trees are thirsty," he whispered. I chuckled, putting my pen down. "Olive trees? We don't have olive trees, Danny. We have a maple tree in the backyard." He turned to me then. The look in his eyes stopped my breath. It wasn't confusion. It was a profound adult pity. As if I were the child who didn't understand. "Not here, Papa," he said softly. "In the garden. Before the soldiers came. The dust, it covers the leaves so they can't breathe." A chill, irrational and sharp, pricked the back of my neck. "What soldiers, Daniel? Are you playing a game?" He didn't answer. He simply looked back at his blocks. He had built something. I hadn't noticed it before. It wasn't a tower or a castle. It was a wall. A low, crumbling wall of uneven wooden blocks, encircling a single, empty space in the center. "I'm tired," he murmured, rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand, returning instantly to being a 6-year-old boy. "Can I have some milk?" That was the first crack in the glass. I dismissed it. Kids have active imaginations, I told myself. He probably saw something on TV. I filed it away under synaptic misfire and went back to my grading. I didn't know then that the wall he built wasn't just a toy. It was a memory of a prison. 2 weeks later, looking for a way to bond on a dreary Saturday, I took Daniel to the Museum of History and Industry. There was a traveling exhibit. Life in the Ancient Near East. I expected him to be bored. I expected him to drag his feet and ask for ice cream. Instead, as soon as we walked through the heavy glass doors into the dimly lit exhibition hall, Daniel's posture changed. He straightened. His grip on my hand tightened, not in fear, but in intensity. The air in the museum was cool and smelled of old paper and conditioning. We walked past glass cases filled with clay pots, rusted swords, and fragments of papyrus. I read the placards aloud, trying to be the educational father. "Look, Danny. These are coins from the Roman Empire. They used these to buy bread." Daniel didn't look at the coins. He was staring at a large, panoramic reconstruction of a marketplace in Jerusalem, circa 30 AD. It was a beautiful painting, detailed and vibrant. "It's too loud," Daniel whispered. I looked around. The museum was nearly empty. "It's quiet, buddy. Just us." "No." He shook his head, wincing. "The market. The animals. The shouting. It smells like burned hair and cumin." I knelt down to his eye level. Danny, that's just a picture. It doesn't smell. He walked past me, drawn like a magnet to a specific display case in the center of the room. Inside, resting on red velvet, was a replica of a Roman sandal, leather, studded with iron hobnails. Daniel pressed his face against the glass. His breath fogged the surface. This is wrong, he said firmly. I sighed, patience wearing thin. What is wrong? It's a sandal, Daniel. Archaeologists found it. The strap. He pointed a small finger at the leather loop near the ankle. It crosses the wrong way. If you tie it like that, it slips when you run on the stones. They tied it under the heel. I stared at him. How would you know that? He looked up at me, his face pale under the museum track lighting. Because my feet hurt, Papa. I ran so far. I ran until the strap broke. I felt a wave of dizziness. It was the specific detail, the tactile memory of pain, that unsettled me. Children imagine dragons and heroes. They don't imagine the ergonomic failure of ancient footwear. Then, the true déjà vu hit. We moved to the next room. A large-scale model of the Second Temple stood in the center. It was a masterpiece of miniature architecture. I've been here, Daniel said. His voice was devoid of wonder. It was factual. We've never been to Israel, Daniel. I know the way, he said. He pointed to a small, nondescript gate on the southern wall of the model. That's the water gate. But they forgot the fountain. I looked closer at the placard. It listed the gates, the beautiful gate, the Nicanor gate. There was no mention of a fountain. There's no fountain, Danny. There was, he insisted, his voice rising, trembling with a sudden, overwhelming emotion. A small stone basin. For the birds. He used to sit there. Before they took him. Who? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He looked at the model, then at his own hands, turning them over as if expecting to see dirt and calluses instead of soft, childlike skin. The teacher, he whispered. I waited for him by the water. But he never came back. Suddenly, Daniel collapsed. His knees just gave way. I caught him before he hit the floor. He was burning up, instantly feverish. As I gathered him into my arms, rushing towards the exit, he wasn't crying for me. He was muttering in a language I didn't recognize, a guttural, rhythmic sound that sounded nothing like English. It sounded like prayer. Or a plea. As I burst out into the rainy Seattle afternoon, hail pelting my face, I realized the comfortable walls of my scientific world had just developed a hairline fracture. My son wasn't just imagining things. He was remembering them. The fever burned for 3 days. It was a strange heat, dry, relentless, yet his pulse remained slow, almost meditative. I did what any doctor would do. I hospitalized my own son. We ran every test in the book. MRI, EEG, blood panels. I was looking for meningitis, encephalitis, a tumor pressing on the temporal lobe. The results came back pristine. Physiologically perfect, the neurologist told me, holding up the scan of Daniel's brain. There is no anomaly, Thomas. It's just a febrile seizure. Or perhaps night terrors triggered by stress. Stress? He was 6. His biggest stress should have been tying his shoelaces. We took him home, but the boy we brought back was altered. The silence I had noticed earlier had deepened into a chasm. He stopped playing with his blocks. He stopped watching cartoons. He would sit by the window, watching the sun track across the sky, as if measuring time by a different clock. Then came the nights. If you have never heard a child scream in the grip of a memory that isn't theirs, pray you never do. It wasn't the startled cry of a nightmare about monsters. It was a guttural, raw sound of adult agony. It happened at 3:13 a.m. Every single night. I would rush into his room, heart hammering, to find him thrashing in his sheets. But he wasn't fighting off imaginary dragons. He was curling into a ball, protecting his head, his ribs. He was flinching from blows I couldn't see. Stop! He would shriek. I didn't steal it. I didn't. I would grab his shoulders, trying to wake him. Daniel! Danny, it's Papa! You're safe! But he would look right through me. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated, reflecting a terror that didn't belong in a Seattle bedroom. The torch! He whimpered one night, clutching my arm so hard his fingernails broke the skin. Put out the torch. The smoke, it hurts my eyes. The room was pitch black. There was no fire. But when I wiped his face, he smelled, faintly, impossibly, of wood smoke and unwashed wool. I am a man of data. When phenomena cannot be explained, they must be recorded. I set up a high-fidelity audio recorder in his room. I told myself it was to monitor his sleep apnea. In truth, I was afraid of what he was saying in the dark. On the fourth night, the screaming stopped. It was replaced by whispering. I sat in my study, headphones on, listening to the live feed from his room. The rain was lashing against the window again. At first, it sounded like gibberish. Baby talk. But the cadence was wrong. It had a rhythm. A structure. It was guttural, full of hard KH sounds and soft, breathy vowels. I isolated a clip. I played it back. Eli. Eli lama sabachthani. No. That was a cliché. A phrase from a movie. But he didn't stop there. He continued, his voice rapid, panicked. Lo. Lo haish. Ani lo makir oto. I didn't speak Hebrew. I didn't speak Aramaic. But I knew what Google was. With shaking hands, I typed the phonetic sounds into the search bar, transcribing as best I could. Result: modern and ancient Hebrew. Translation: no. Not the man. I do not know him. I froze. The cursor blinked on the screen like a mocking eye. Then, the voice on the recording changed. It wasn't panicked anymore. It was broken. Kifa, Daniel whispered. Why did you run? You promised. I searched Kifa. Result: Aramaic for rock. The original name of Peter. The Apostle. I took off the headphones. The silence in my office was deafening. My son, who had barely mastered the alphabet, was speaking a dialect dead for 2,000 years, admonishing a biblical figure for cowardice. I walked into his room. He was awake. He was sitting up in bed, looking at his hands. Danny? I whispered. He looked at me. My name isn't Danny, he said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly mature. Then who are you? I am Elian, he said. Son of Baruch. The water carrier. The next morning, the separation between Daniel and Elian blurred. He ate his breakfast mechanically, staring at a piece of sourdough toast as if it were a rare treasure. Draw it for me, I said. I placed a sketch pad and charcoal pencils in front of him. The place you see in your dreams. Draw it. I expected a stick figure house. A sun in the corner. Daniel picked up the charcoal. He didn't hold it like a child, in a fist. He held it delicately, like a quill. He began to sketch with furious speed. Lines appeared. Architecture. Not the skyscrapers of Seattle, but low stone structures. Arches. A courtyard paved with uneven stones. In the center, he drew a fire pit. And around the edges, soldiers. He didn't draw them as cartoon villains. He drew the shape of their helmets, the specific curve of a Roman galea. He drew the pilum spears leaning against a wall. But it was the perspective that chilled me. He was drawing the scene from below. From the ground level. Behind a pillar. This is where I hid, he said, pointing to a dark smudge in the corner of the paper. Why were you hiding, Elian? I asked, using the name he had given me. Because they were angry, he said. The high priest. Caiaphas. He was shouting inside. And the tall man, the one who followed the teacher, he was outside by the fire. He was scared. Peter? I asked. Daniel nodded. He said he didn't know him. 3 times. I heard him. I was right there, behind the water jar. He looked up at me, his eyes brimming with a 6-year-old's tears but an ancient soul's grief. He looked at me, Papa. The teacher. As they dragged him out. He looked right at me. His face was bleeding. But he didn't look angry. He looked sorry. Sorry for who? For us, Daniel whispered. For all of us. I looked at the drawing. The detail was impossible. The layout of the high priest's courtyard. I had seen diagrams of it in history books, theoretical reconstructions. This matched them. But it had details the books missed. A cracked paving stone. A specific pattern on the water jar. My son wasn't hallucinating. He was a witness. I realized then that I was out of my depth. Medicine could not cure this. Science could not explain this. I needed a different kind of expert. I reached for my phone and dialed the number of an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Dr. Aris Thorne. Professor of Semitic languages and biblical archaeology. Aris, I said when he answered, my voice trembling. I need you to come to Seattle. Now. Thomas? What's wrong? I think my son is trapped in the year 33 AD. Dr. Aris Thorne looked nothing like an Indiana Jones archetype. He was a small man, smelling of pipe tobacco and tweed, with thick spectacles that magnified his perpetually skeptical eyes. He sat in our living room, a notebook on his lap, looking at Daniel with a mixture of pity and academic detachment. Thomas, Aris said, keeping his voice low. You know how this looks. Dissociative identity disorder. Suggestibility. You're a neurologist. You know the brain can fabricate entire worlds to cope with trauma. There was no trauma. I snapped, pouring him a scotch. Just ask him. Just listen. Daniel walked in. He didn't run. He didn't bring toys. He walked with that strange, weary gait, hands clasped behind his back, head slightly bowed. He climbed onto the oversized armchair, his legs dangling, looking absurdly small. Aris leaned forward. He decided to start in English, testing the waters. Hello, Daniel. Your father tells me you like history. Daniel looked at Aris. His gaze was unnerving. He didn't look at Aris's face. He looked at his shoes, then his hands. You smell like the scribes, Daniel said. Ink and dry dust. Aris chuckled nervously. I suppose I do. Daniel, I want to play a game. I'm going to say a word, and you tell me what it means. Aris switched languages seamlessly. He spoke a phrase in ancient Greek. Tkonomos. Daniel didn't blink. The one who counts the oil jars. But he steals. Aris stiffened. He glanced at me. Lucky guess, he muttered. He tried again, this time in Aramaic, the dialect of the Galilee region, not the Judean dialect. Talitha Kumi. Daniel frowned. Why do you speak like the fishermen? He asked. That is country talk. In the city, we speak properly. Aris dropped his pen. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. He recognized the regional dialect, Aris whispered to me, his face straining of color. Thomas, a PhD student, struggles with that distinction. How? Aris turned back to the boy, his skepticism evaporating, replaced by a feverish intensity. Elian? Is that your name? Yes. Who is the high priest? Caiaphas, Daniel answered instantly. But Anna still holds the leash. Everyone knows the old man rules from the shadows. Aris gasped. That is a historical nuance. The Gospels mention Caiaphas, but the political dynamic, the influence of Annas, that is something Josephus wrote about. A 6-year-old cannot know the internal politics of the Sanhedrin. Aris reached into his satchel. He pulled out a small velvet pouch. He spilled the contents onto the coffee table. 3 ancient coins. Replicas he used for lectures. Tell me about these, Aris commanded. Daniel reached out. He ignored the gold one. He ignored the silver denarius. He picked up a small, jagged bronze coin, a mite. The smallest currency of the time. This buys a sparrow, Daniel said softly, turning the bronze over in his fingers. Or 2 loaves if the baker likes you. But the bread is hard today. The grain is bad this year. He looked at Eris. Why do you have this? Did you beg for it? No, Eris said, his voice trembling. I found it. You shouldn't keep it, Daniel said, dropping it back onto the table. It has the widow's mark. It's for the temple treasury. If you keep it, the prayers don't go up. Eris sat back, taking a long drink of his scotch. His hand was shaking. The widow's mite, he murmured. The cultural context of the offering. Thomas, he's describing the inflation of grain prices in 33 AD. There was a drought that year. It's in the subliminal historical records, not the storybooks. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't an interrogation anymore. It was a séance without the theatrics. We were in the presence of a ghost wrapped in the skin of my son. Elian, I asked, stepping forward. Why are you here? Why now? Daniel looked at me. The child was gone. The eyes were ancient. Because the circle isn't finished, he said. The memory must be told. The stone was rolled away, but we, the ones who watched, we never left. Eris, being a man of theology as much as history, pushed deeper. He needed to understand the metaphysics. If you are Elian, Eris asked gently, where have you been for 2,000 years? Have you slept? Daniel closed his eyes. Not sleep. Waiting. It's like standing in a hallway filled with light. You see the others go by. You see the faces change. But the thirst stays. Karma? Eris suggested. Do you have a debt to pay? I ran away, Daniel whispered. The guilt in his voice was crushing. I was carrying the water. I saw him fall. The cross was heavy. He looked at me. He needed water. I had the jar. It was full. He began to weep. Silent, heavy tears. But I was afraid of the soldiers. I turned. I poured the water into the dust so they wouldn't take my jar. I let him thirst. And now, I am always thirsty. I felt my heart break. This wasn't just a memory. It was a trauma imprinted on a soul, carrying over through centuries. The concept of hell wasn't fire and brimstone. It was the eternal regret of a single moment of cowardice. Is that why you are here, Daniel? I asked, kneeling before him, grabbing his small hands. To be forgiven? He opened his eyes. They were clear now. No, Papa. To witness. He told me, before he died. He whispered it to the wind. Father, forgive them. But I never accepted it. I didn't think it was for me. And now? Now I know, Daniel said, looking at the map of Jerusalem Eris had spread on the table. I have to show you where I hid the jar. It's still there. If you find the jar, you find the proof. And I can sleep. Eris and I locked eyes. The impossible had just become tangible. He gave us a location. A specific physical coordinate in a city halfway across the world. The jar, Eris whispered. If it's there. Thomas, if an excavation confirms a first-century water jar in that specific strata, it changes everything. It proves the continuity of consciousness. I looked at my son. He looked exhausted, like a candle burned down to the wick. We have to go, I said. To Jerusalem. The flight to Tel Aviv was a blur of turbulence and unease. Daniel slept most of the way, his head resting on my shoulder. In his sleep, he didn't twitch. He didn't mutter. It was the deep, conserving sleep of a soldier before battle. When we landed, the heat hit us like a physical blow. It was dry, ancient heat. Eris had arranged everything: permits, a guide, a private car. He was vibrating with nervous energy. I was just numb. I felt like a man walking to his own execution, or perhaps, his own resurrection. We drove up to Jerusalem. As the modern highway gave way to the limestone hills, Daniel woke up. He pressed his face against the window. Changed, he whispered. So many stones. Where are the trees? We arrived at the dig site. It wasn't a tourist attraction. It was a restricted archaeological zone near the southern wall of the old city, close to the awful excavation. Eris had pulled strings with the Israel Antiquities Authority, claiming we had credible intel regarding first-century domestic refuse strata. A fancy way of saying a 6-year-old told us to dig here. The site was a pit of beige dust and scaffolding. The sun was high, bleaching the colors out of the world. Here, Daniel said. He didn't need the map. He walked past the lead archaeologist, past the taped-off sections. He walked to a patch of unexcavated earth near a crumbling Byzantine wall. This isn't right. The site foreman barked in Hebrew. You can't be here. Eris stepped in, speaking fluent Hebrew, calming the man, flashing permits. I ignored them. I watched my son. Daniel fell to his knees in the dirt. He wasn't playing. He began to claw at the ground with his bare hands. It's deep, Daniel panted, his voice straining. The rubble covered it when the temple burned. But it's here. I know it's here. I knelt beside him. I didn't care about my suit pants. I didn't care about the science. I started digging too. We dug for an hour. The foreman watched, arms crossed, amused. Eris paced back and forth, wiping sweat from his forehead. Thomas, Eris said softly, the strata here is mixed. It's mostly Ottoman. We need to go down 3 meters to hit the Herodian level. We can't do this by hand. Daniel stopped. His hands were dirty, fingernails black with soil. He looked at a large, embedded rock. Not down, Daniel said. Under. He pointed to a small cavity beneath the rock. It looked like a foxhole, or a collapsed drain. I pushed it in, Daniel whispered. So the Romans wouldn't steal it. I pushed it deep. I looked at the hole. It was too small for my arm. I looked at Daniel. Do it, I said. Daniel reached his small arm into the darkness of the earth. He reached in up to his shoulder. He bit his lip, his eyes scrunching shut. I feel it, he gasped. Be careful, Eris yelled, rushing forward. If it's pottery, it will be fragile. Daniel pulled. He grunted with effort. There was a sound of scraping stone, a dry friction that echoed the passage of centuries. He pulled his hand out. Clutched in his small, dirty fingers was not a gold coin. Not a jewel. It was a handle. A clay handle of a water jug. Rough, terracotta, stained by 2,000 years of darkness. Attached to it was a jagged piece of the vessel's body. Eris fell to his knees. He took a brush from his pocket and gently dusted the shard. He pulled out a magnifying glass. His hands shook so violently he almost dropped it. First century, Eris choked out. Herodian commonware. The clay composition matches the Kfar Hanania kills. Look at the mark, Daniel said. His voice was faint. The potter's thumb slipped. There is a ridge. Eris looked. He gasped. My God! There is a deformity in the clay. A fingerprint. But that wasn't the proof. The proof was what happened next. Daniel took the shard from Eris. He held it to his chest. He closed his eyes. And for the first time in months, the tension left his face. The lines of adult worry, the ancient grief, the heaviness, it all evaporated. He exhaled. A long, shuddering breath. I didn't steal it, he whispered to the wind. I just wanted to save it. But I should have given the water. I know that now. The wind picked up on the hill of offal, blowing dust across the excavations. The sound of the afternoon call to prayer began to echo from the minarets above us, mingling with the ringing of church bells. A symphony of faith in a city of stone. Daniel opened his eyes. He looked at me. And I knew. Elian was gone. Papa? He asked. His voice was high. Childish. Why are my hands dirty? I grabbed him and hugged him harder than I had ever hugged anything in my life. I buried my face in his neck, smelling the sweat and the dust and the sweet scent of my son. We were just digging for treasure, Danny, I sobbed. We found it. Can we go home now? He asked. I want to play with my blocks. Yes, I said. Yes, we can go home. We left the shard with Eris. It belonged to history. Daniel belonged to me. I am still a man of science. But science is just the language we use to describe the miracle, not to deny it. My son doesn't remember Elian anymore. The nightmares are gone. He is just a boy who likes peanut butter and cartoons. But sometimes, when it rains in Seattle, he will look out the window with a stillness that stops my heart. And I wonder. I wonder about the water carrier who ran away. I wonder about the mercy of a teacher who looked at a frightened boy and offered forgiveness across the span of 2 millennia. We are not just flesh and bone. We are echoes. We are stories that insist on being told. And the soul is a traveler that never forgets the way home. The olive trees are not thirsty anymore. And neither am I.